Hope you're having a great day. Welcome to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizen Bank Studio. Hey, we've got a really special show today, something I've been really looking forward to, because when I have the opportunity to visit with statewide leaders, and because we do the long format the way we do for the whole show today, we're going to be visiting with Speaker of the House, Jason White, looking back on the legislative session, highs and lows and successes and so on. We'll look ahead to the 2026 session. What kind of things are being put in place? And we'll talk about his great leadership that he's got in place and, a bunch of other stuff. But without any further ado, let me welcome Speaker Jason White back to the Ricky Mathews Show. Jason, how you doing, my friend?
Good, Ricky. Good to be with y'all this morning. It's good to be back on.
Listen,
it's been too long.
Yeah, look, it's summertime. Down here in the summertime, a lot of fishing's going on. We've had some great fishing trips recently. Recently, over the 4th of July weekend, we had the deep sea fishing rodeo, something everybody focuses on this time of year. Already at our place up in the Mississippi Delta, we're trying to think about. We've had so much rain. We're trying to figure out when can we get up there and do some bush hogging. Some of the weeds are neck deep today. I mean, one thing about rain, farmers love it. You get too much, they don't like that for sure. But boy, when you get that rain going in the Mississippi Delta, weeds can grow in places you never expected them to do. Have you been able to spend any time in the outdoors yourself?
I have. I think what the college football pundits talk about is once July gets here, that's the talking season until the football season starts. For us, getting ready for hunting season, kind of middle of June, you start getting that itch and guys start thinking about their food plots and their bush hogging and all the things you're talking about. So it's kind of working season in our neck of the woods for all of my personal pursuits, both in the deer hunting woods and getting ready for ducks and that sort of thing. But you see the activity in the hub around. I live in a little small community in the little town of West. Tons of hunting camps surrounding us in that big black river bottom. And I start seeing the guys and their equipment coming through town, headed to their different spots too. Anybody that doesn't think that's a huge drive in our state's economy, especially in our rural communities, is missing the boat, because it is real. And it's fun to see. It's another one of those positive things that our state enjoys, that, you hear the governor sometimes talk about some things are best kept secrets, and maybe some people say we want to keep them that way. They're so good. But certainly our outdoors is to be celebrated. And this time of the year, we enjoy a lot of that.
Well, as you know, on my outdoors show, I talking about it being the capital of the outdoors in America, because I really believe it is. I believe when you add it all up, the sum total of it all, you're not going to find better deer hunting and turkey hunting, and in some cases duck hunting. Certainly the offshore fishing and backwater fishing and some of the freshwater lakes we have in the state, incredible. What I love about the hunting culture is that, as we've chatted before, it's more about the experience, about spending time in the woods with your friends and family and coming together. And you're right, this is the time of year when a lot of hard work starts to happen. I just called today to get my four-wheelers back from service. Got to get them back up to the Delta. We're already, we're thinking about all the things we got to do, but that's part of it. I mean, once you actually go hunting, a lot of camaraderie has already happened prior to that, hasn't it?
My wife says we like this part as much as the other, the getting ready, you know what I'm saying? That whole part's as fun as the actual taking part in the actual hunts, whatever they are, so to speak.
Hey, listen,
I just finished reading It's been out a little bit, but a Mississippian, a guy by the name of Jim Cruz, a lawyer in Canton. He's a big, especially waterfowler, and I just finished reading his book, Amidst the Cypress. I highly recommend it. But he's got in his prelogue, when he starts the book, he talks about he lives in Canton, Mississippi, and to your point about the sportsman's or outdoors capital of the world, he says I can be on the Gulf Coast fishing in 2.5 hours. 3 hours. I can be in the Mississippi Delta, world-class waterfowling, or I can shoot big deer right here in my backyard in Madison County where he lives, or fishing a lake or dove hunt or whatever it is. Not many states, they may have one thing that they call great in that part of what we enjoy in the outdoors. we've got it all right here, and it's accessible and in most cases affordable in a way that other states and places in our country don't enjoy. So it's certainly to be protected and celebrated at the same time.
Man, I can't agree more. We've said it before on the show. I mean, you kill a world-class white-tailed deer in the morning, or go on a world-class duck hunt, and then in the afternoon be on the coast and catch some redfish and specks. I mean, what a great combination, man.
Right.
Hey, listen, of course, this isn't the outdoor show, but it is an important part of our heritage, and these things are happening this time of year. Before we move too far, we'll get to the legislative session, talk about the budget challenges that were kind of defined by the end of the session, but also we'll talk about what's coming up next year. I just one quick note, Bill Kincaid, who is your chairman of the Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks Committee, somebody I've really enjoyed working with. Bill is a committed outdoorsman and extremely passionate that the House do its part in passing the sort of bills like a state turkey wildlife stamp, for example, or the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund, and any number of other things that he's focused on. But he's been a terrific leader. You can comment about that, but you've got some good chairmen in place these days, don't you?
Certainly, I would agree with you on that statement, since I know who appointed him. But I would tell anybody, whatever success we've had, in our 2 years with me in the speaker's role, is because we got so many of those picks right. And Chairman Kincaid, Bill is right where he needs to be. He's passionate about it. And I like it because I even hear from my other colleagues, sometimes they'll say, man, Bill is worrying me about that bill. He says, I've got to support it. I've got to vote. I'm like, he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's passionate about it. And you need to hear him out, whatever the issue is. Yeah, he's enjoying that work, and he has a respect of his colleagues in the House and in the Senate, and he's doing it for the right reasons. And so I couldn't say enough good things about his leadership with our Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks Committee. He's got in there. He's actually done the hard work, dug into everything that's going on at the agency and their budgets, while at the same time kind of keeping the Mississippi sportsman in mind as well, and how what we're doing, we may be debating a bill or thinking about a policy, and Bill will say, well, wait a minute, let's think about our hunter in Mississippi and how is he or she going to perceive what we're doing here. And again, it's part of our positive perception around the country is, hey, they got one thing maybe better than anybody else, and that's our outdoors and hunting and fishing. And we certainly want to, keep it that way. And Bill's done an excellent job there. I'm proud of his work.
There's no doubt. So look, we're going to get into the tax reform triumph that happened this year. But when you look back on the session, was it a tough session for you? I mean, how do you think about looking back on this session?
It was tough, but it wasn't, you got to remember, Ricky, I went through the COVID session in 2020 when we were here for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. But it was tough because I think it was a little bit weird. We had that huge policy victory with House Bill 1, which it had 4 major components that any of the one of those 4 would have been a major political victory, in my opinion. Elimination of the personal income tax, cutting the grocery tax. We had the highest in the nation at 7%, cutting it a full 2% and absorbing the total cut and not putting our cities. Adjusting the gas tax in a way that gets us out of a 1987 program where we've been flat since 35, 40 years. And moving our highway system and infrastructure into a modern 21st century funding model. And then fourth, addressing the deficit with our public employees retirement system. Those are 4 huge issues that, all of them don't get you a lot of clicks on your Facebook or Twitter page, but they had to be dealt with. But the fact that we were able to put them all in one bill, so that was a huge victory. And I will admit that That felt good to get there. However we got there, it felt good to get there. But there was a sense of, I won't call it letdown, but it was weird because we didn't have a budget and we adjourned without a budget from our regular session. So that was different, and that probably wore on all of us a little bit. But that was a different issue. Now, some say and attribute it back to the politics of House Bill 1. Maybe some of that got spilled over into the budget disagreements we had with the Senate. But there were also practical reasons that had really nothing to do with House Bill 1. And we can talk about those at length and probably take up the whole show. But it was a tough session, but it was worth it. And that's kind of what we signed up for. And we said we were going to spend our time here on big issues that actually move the needle for all Mississippians, and not spend so much time off in the ditch on something maybe that does get the bunch of clicks on my Twitter page or Facebook page, but really doesn't do anything positively for the average Mississippian. So those were big issues, and we spent most of our time on them.
We're visiting with the Speaker of the House for the state of Mississippi, Jason White. When we come back, we'll get into it a little bit deeper. How important was this tax reform that we just passed? I think is very significant. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're visiting with Jason White, the Speaker of the House for the state of Mississippi. And we're just looking back on this legislative session. And before we get done with the show, we're going to actually look forward to the next legislative session and think about what the Speaker's thinking about as it relates to bringing people together and identifying the issues that are going to be important to him and his team and this state. But the Build Up Mississippi Act, House Bill 1, you said it, you bit off a lot. And we joked during the break. You said it last year on my show. You said it many times that you were going to bite off a lot. You were not going to mess around. You were going to try to make a difference, and you set out to take that leadership role, and that's kind of where you landed. But it's true, isn't it?
It is true, and maybe we're just naive or new enough on the block that we don't know any other way but to go ahead and do it. But we spent a lot of time. We started this time last year getting ready for this past spring's, the 25 session. And that had kind of, we had focused on the school funding formula our first session, building some consensus, putting our smartest people on it who were engaged in that issue. And it led to a very positive result in the rewrite of our K-12 funding formula in a way that all folks now are agreeing what was a huge and positive step for our state. So we kind of took that model. We spent all of last summer and fall studying tax reform in the ways that we tax Mississippians and the way that we make our budget, the issues surrounding our public employees retirement system, the issues surrounding our sales tax and our grocery tax, and the issues surrounding infrastructure. And what had long plagued us was, I get kidded a lot of times by folks. They're like, Jason, why do y'all keep talking about tax cuts or this, that? I'm like, look, there's 122 House members and 79 of them say they're Republicans, signed up, run as Republicans. You're going to continue running $500 million surplus every year. In other words, $500 million, $500 million, $600, $700 million more than we spend in our revenues and our budget. We're going to continue to talk about tax cuts. So that led to an overall discussion where we put some of our smartest people and folks that had really been engaged on the issue. We formed a select committee. They spent all summer and fall. We brought in experts from all over the nation, got everybody in the room. And Haley Barber gave me a good piece of advice one time that I probably didn't think much about it at the time, but he said, the trick is to get the right people in the room. Well, even if they're the ones that don't agree with you, get them in the room and get everybody at the table. And maybe that also comes from some of my, country lawyering over the years, practicing law in a small town. A lot of times folks want to be heard. They want to be heard on the issue and have their input and their say. And after that, they can kind of roll with whatever comes from that as long as they have their say. And so that's what we tried to do in that big package of tax reform with personal income tax and grocery tax, as well as and there was some trust there because we had to talk to cities, municipalities, derive a large portion of their revenues from sales tax from groceries. So when we started talking about cutting grocery tax, municipalities were like, hold on, That's how we make our budget and provide services to our residents. So there was some trust there from them to be sure that we were going to get that equation right so that they were made whole. And we were able to do that, thread that needle, and it was a good result for Mississippi. We finally, 8 states don't have an income tax. Unfortunately for us, 3 of those big players are in the South, in Texas, Florida, and our sister state to the north, Tennessee. We were finally able to move that piece off the table when it comes to competing with those states, and especially with Tennessee, our neighbor to the north. If all other things were equal, folks would choose them because of that. I've got to pay tax, or I don't have to pay personal income tax on a state basis. Now we're able. That's not going to get us every economic deal. That's not going to keep every business here. That's not going to get every relocated business here. But it's one more piece of the puzzle, just like our great outdoors that we enjoy, our quality of life, just like our education gains that we've seen over the last few years. Lots of positive momentum, and that was one more thing that we could do to set ourselves up for future success. And I think, I tell people this all the time, Mississippi is just small enough, less than 3 million people. We can kind of bob and weave with the best of them, and maybe that makes us a little bit nimble there. And we're punching above our weight. And for once now, when we go to legislative conferences, the other states actually want to talk to chairmen like Bill Kincaid, or to our education chairman, Rob Robertson, or to Trey Lamar at Ways and Means. How did y'all do that? What players were involved in that? And let's talk about that, whatever the issues are. So it is kind of cool to be from Mississippi. You hear the governor talk about it a lot, but it's actually true. Whether he's talking about Mississippi Miracle or our recent economic development gains and GDP growth, it's real, and you can feel it a little bit. It's real. It's positive. Positive conversations around the Capitol. We worked hard in the off season.
Comment. Just one comment real quick about what the comment that Haley Barbour suggested to you, or the advice he gave you. I got to see it up close and personal after Hurricane Katrina. Even wrote about it in the foreword to his book about Katrina. But you pointed out this. You have to be able to listen, and people want to be heard, and that's definitely true. But in something as complex as you guys tackled, I'm just putting my CEO hat on for just a second. You can't go to where you want to go if you don't know where you are now, and you start to factor in all the debates from last year around the PERS program and what needed to happen there. I think that Brad White had done a good job of keeping front and center that the formula around infrastructure improvements in the state needed to change dramatically as vehicles became more efficient and electric became part of our future and all of that. You had to have confidence that the projections you were looking at, you had to have confidence that the actual numbers you were looking at were something that you could literally bank on. You guys were trying to consider paying down debt, and you were looking at the surpluses that existed. I mean, I could go on and on. This picture of the current situation you were looking at was super complex. I give Trey Lamar huge props on the House side for his ability to sort of wrestle all those components to the table. Again, you can't go to where you want to go if you don't know where you are now. And to know where you are now, you have to have confidence in the numbers. That's why when you talk about reducing income tax, reducing grocery tax, all the issues that involve municipalities and counties and so on, it is a lot, man. I mean, it is miraculous, actually.
It was a lot of balls in the air. When you start bringing in all the county supervisors and all the municipalities, and then everything that goes with MDOT and the infrastructure world that our state runs on. And you mentioned Brad White. He was not only good to get the right people for us when we're looking at numbers and how we do our transportation here, but he also had the respect of people in the Capitol. And so, he doesn't show up every day over here at the Capitol and say the sky's falling. But when he does come and he starts talking, people listen. And so he had some street cred from political circles that maybe had nothing to do with MDOT or infrastructure that got him in doorways where people would actually listen to what he was saying. And I'll put his conservative bona fides up against anybody. And when he was saying, guys, it's time for us to do something in the infrastructure pace and get off of this 1987 flat tax model, he had the right tone, and we couldn't have done it without him. So again, it was about getting the right people in place, and it worked out for Mississippi. I'm proud of the product. It wasn't pretty getting there, and I tell people all the time, I wish it wasn't. I wish the elbows weren't that sharp, and I wish it wasn't as ugly as it sometimes is, because I'm typically a nice guy and would prefer the pretty way, but that one got a little rough and tumble there for a while, and friendships were probably tested a little bit, but Mississippi is better for it. They are better for House Bill 1, the Build Up Mississippi Act. I'm proud of it. Yes, it is a conservative long-term approach to reducing the personal income tax, but we didn't get in this issue or this deal of taxing people's work in a year or two, and we weren't going to get out of it that quick. So it was prudent to do it over a long period of time, and that was something that our Senate colleagues insisted on, and that became part of the bill. And the process worked. As ugly as it was, the process worked.
You know what? I mean, listen, democracy is messy, man. And as you pointed out, any one of these items by themselves could have wrecked the progress of a bill like this. But so you have multiple debates happening simultaneously, and the Senate wanted to build 14 years. They wanted to build these fail-safes in, going a bit more carefully than maybe the House wanted to do. But at the end of the day, when you say, okay, let's set all the noise aside of what it took to make this bill happen, you made it happen, and the governor signed it. And then when you add that to, let's face it, Tate Reeves' legacy is going to be economic development. I mean, he's put all his eggs in the basket. The legislature has supported him in that effort. I say it with mayors all the time, that some of the less sexy thing about being a great mayor is infrastructure. I mean, let's face it. If you don't have infrastructure, you can't have development. And
that's right.
What Brad White was preaching, and you guys knew it, you knew it intellectually, you knew it intuitively, that it's going to be a critical component to the economic success of our state, that we have those pieces working together. So you couldn't do one thing without the other.
Hey, you hadn't lived till you walked in a Republican caucus meeting and looked at 78 Republicans and said, guys, we need to talk about raising the excise tax on gas.
Right.
That's not a fun place. That's not a fun place to go. But for a Mississippian, for a taxpayer, it's a $2 billion tax cut when it's all said and done.
We're visiting with Speaker Jason White. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're visiting with the Speaker of the House, Jason White. We're reflecting on this past really significant legislative session. There were ups and downs, but as it relates to tax reform and the conversation we were just having about all the moving pieces, it was Mississippi's version of a one big beautiful bill. In fact, it was a one big beautiful bill before we had a one big beautiful bill. So, Jason, maybe you set the stage.
Maybe we'll go with that. How about that? I don't know if our friends in D.C. would agree with that, but it sure felt like that for us in those days. Some people might have said it wasn't beautiful at all, and certainly maybe the process wasn't. But it was, again, as I've already said, it was worth it, and because of all the different dynamics involved in the different moving pieces, it probably made it a little more palatable for particular members who might have not liked one of the main four pieces, but they really were passionate about the other three. It made it where they could vote for it for whatever reason. And that is, I found that to be my main job here in my time as Speaker, is trying to build consensus and get us, keep the main thing and not get so sidetracked with either personal political agendas or hot button issues that really don't move the needle for us. And so this was maybe, if we had written it up before session, we would have taken this 10 times out of 10. And so it felt like a wholesome and real victory.
Well, you talk about your leaders, and I mean, Trey Lamar, and we'll come back to him for a second. Man, oh man. I mean, he was a good partner for you on this bill, wasn't he?
He was, and he is not only a lawyer, he's got his LLM. He's a tax lawyer, so he speaks from a position of he has some knowledge on the subject just in general, and then he has respect to he's one of our smartest members, and on this issue, he's been engaged for years on it, and he's passionate about it, and so you don't ever have to wonder. Sometimes you wonder, hey, when it gets hot, who's going to still be with you on an issue? And you didn't have to wonder about that with him on this issue. He was going to be there. And that's kind of important when the bullets start flying a little bit. It's easy for folks to back up and say, oh, let's just form a study committee. And you've seen that, Ricky and Kyle, on bills, something you think's fixing to pass. And all of a sudden you find out, oh, they made it into a study committee and they're going to study it another year. You don't have to worry about that with Trey. He'll go down with the ship, and there's a lot to be said for that. And sometimes folks would, say, "Well, he's too passionate about it." And I said, "Well, maybe he is, but I'm glad he's on our side of the equation for sure." So he worked long and hard on that, and he does deserve kudos for being so engaged in that process.
Well, listen, transformational leadership is not easy. It's not. And listen. I don't care how good you are at adapting to change. Every single human being, if you look at the 4 steps of adapting to change, every human being responds to change initially the same, and that is we resist it. All of us do.
Sure.
And transformational leaders.
I learned that quick, Ricky, around here. When you in state government, especially, you start moving the cheese around a little bit, and folks get really upset and really nervous, and they start telling you all the reasons why we can't do that, which that's kind of where we ended up in this budget fuss, if you will, with the Senate. I have been pretty adamant from day one that we weren't going to keep being last minute on doing the budget. We always waited till the last weekend, and then in the middle of the night, we're voting on 100 bills that nobody's halfway read, which number one leads to mistakes. And number two, it's just not a way. There's a better way to run that railroad. And in today's world, our budget folks, analysts in House and Senate, and for the state as a whole, they know where we're going. They pegged our revenues this year at $7.6 billion. We came in at $7.640 billion. They missed it by $40 million on a $7.6 billion. They know where we're going. There's no reason to wait till the last weekend. And so I've been pretty adamant about that from the start. We're going to do this earlier, more transparent, in the light of day, and not hurried. Everybody's going to know what's in these budgets. And I still hadn't been able to get the Senate on board with that idea. And I think part of it is just, some of those guys have been here a long time, and those girls have been here a long time. And it's the way we've always done it, and they don't want to change. And so now, at the very least, they know I'm not kidding now, because I said we're not going to be here. We'll stay on conference weekend and work on general legislation that's maybe got an issue hanging out there. We're not going to be here all night throwing together a budget. Let's work on it early, and like you would on any other thing in your business or, in the private sector. We didn't get there. That forced us to leave without a budget. So that was kind of anticlimactic after the huge victory of House Bill 1. And we had some other victories this session too, that probably got lost in the shuffle a little bit because House Bill 1 was so big. But all of those things kind of seemed to take a back burner when we left without a budget. But that had more to do with the logistics of, we're going to do this sooner, y'all, and I couldn't get our Senate counterparts on board on that. We're going to insist on it again next year, and I think you'll see a more orderly process, maybe as a result of our stubbornness on that issue from the House. And I hope so, because my folks in the House are pretty set on more transparency and more method to it than thrown together on conference weekend.
And you don't
have kind of started to demand that. Mississippians want to see it that way.
You don't have there's no way, there's zero way that you can do it last minute and not have important stuff fall through the cracks. It's just like I give you an example. The people who have not followed this, you wouldn't know, but let me just kind of give you the lowdown. We're lucky in that we finally passed what is called an outdoor stewardship trust fund. We have a fund of money now that enables us to draw down federal funds and other matching funds that go toward outdoor enjoyment. Something we worked 2 years to get, and then one part of it we wished we could have gotten, we didn't get, which is essentially a reoccurring revenue source, so that you didn't have to get appropriations every year. So what's happened is they passed it the first year. The next year we come back, and you wait to the last second. I mean, man, they're about to close the books, and oh, okay, we added it. We got it in there. Next year it comes back, same exact thing. This year, of course, we didn't have a budget coming out of the session, going into the special session, and it's just, you just don't know if you're going to get it or not. I wonder how many, because I watch it closely, because I know how important that is to the state, and I know how important that is to the outdoors community. But there's probably another 100 examples just like it, where we're not sure, people who are stakeholders and others. It would be better not to have this last minute, everybody under a lot of pressure, a lot of horse trading going on. I wish we didn't do that. But
I've been in the room when the horse trading starts and when it's going on, and you don't want to be in that scenario. The average Mississippian not only doesn't want to see that, they wouldn't want to be in that scenario. And you certainly don't want whatever your particular thing is up for discussion in that arena, so to speak. I would remind you, the House 2 times passed an outdoor stewardship fund that had a dedicated stream of revenue. And, we fought hard for that. And we predicted this very thing that we see, which is because people are so passionate about the outdoors, that becomes a political football at the end of session for horse trading. And it's not supposed to be that way. We would like to see a dedicated stream of revenue for that. It's why we fought so hard this session, and House Bill 1 had a dedicated stream of revenue for the PERS deficit, instead of getting to the end of session and dividing up the pie and fighting over the money, as you so accurately describe the debates about funding the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund. There's a better and more orderly way. And as you know, and remember, our proposal was from outdoor for sale of hunting and fishing goods and outdoors things. It's what that tax was going to fund that from those proceeds. It wasn't like nobody out, sportsmen weren't asking for a handout. It was going to come from sales on items that they purchase.
Yeah. Yeah. As we've learned, doing diversions are hard. And that's what that essentially.
They're hard. They're hard.
And in this
we tend
now
to
the
like
tax
them
world,
in the House.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was going to say, now with the reform in place, it might even be harder now, because a lot of people banking on the numbers and the projections and all of that.
So we're going to have to watch our budget. We're going to have to watch our budget and watch it close with the cuts that have gone into place.
Yeah, I sense that and understand that. What is interesting is you alluded to this, you when you're in the throes of all of this, some important bills that you wish could have gone through didn't happen. But at the same time, a lot of important bills happen. And when we come back on the other side, one that really is important to me, and I think a growing number of people here in coastal Mississippi, is a seafood labeling bill that almost went to this study committee answer. And at the last minute, it got kind of pulled out of the ditch, and we got it. I think there are a lot of important reasons this is going to be important. An illegal camping ban, a Creighton regulation, military medic license, a lot of stuff that we're not talking about, but there's always a lot of bipartisan support that happens underneath the covers of all these contentious bills. And I think that's one of the things that makes Mississippi legislature kind of unique. When we come back on the other side, we'll talk about some of those things with the Speaker of the House, Jason White. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're visiting with the Speaker of the House, Jason White, for the Mississippi legislature. And I think it's been a terrific conversation. One of the things we'll get to in just a second, I have one more question I want to ask, and that is, when you're the Speaker of the House and you've got House and representatives from all across the state, you're constantly going to be focused on balancing sort of the big reforms like tax reform with community-focused policies. And, I think the seafood labeling bill is a great example of that. We'll come back to that quickly. I just have one more question to ask. I've often said, why don't the big three get together more often? Why don't you get together and strategically plan out the session and the things you agree on and what your budget approach is going to be? I mean, we're Republicans, and you're in charge of, we own the House and Senate and the governorship. Why isn't it easier?
Ricky, that's a good question. We do spend some time together, and we actually do have some of those meetings. I feel like, just from being around here, this is my 14th session. This is my second as speaker. And before I was speaker, I was the pro tem for 4 years, which you really get to know your House members as the pro tem because you're working with them on helping them with legislation. And you're kind of that go-between between the chairman and the speaker on issues that are important to the members. So they come see the pro tem on those issues. When I was rules chairman, I got to know them, helping them do their, resolutions, honoring, the whether it's the big fishing rodeo on the coast and an anniversary or a business celebrating 50 years. Every member gets those resolutions done. So I got to know them. So I feel like I know all of our members very well. And so I feel like I got my finger on the pulse of our membership. And so when I go into those meetings with the lieutenant governor and the governor, I've got some duty to hold what we call a House position, especially when it has huge support, 90, 100 votes, which means 15 or 20 Democrats are even supporting an issue. And we do have some Democrats that cross the aisle and vote with us on a number of issues that become bipartisan because they're so important to most Mississippians. And so I want to, they should be applauded for being willing to do what is right on numerous occasions, even this session, such as House Bill 1, the Build Up Mississippi Act. But those meetings that you allude to, they do take place. I have to remind myself, the governor and the lieutenant governor both have gone through statewide. Mississippians saw them as the right choice to fill those positions, and I certainly respect them for that. And then on top of that, I've never questioned their motives as to maybe if we were different on a position, and you could pick out a big one that we've differed on over the last couple of years. And there have been some, but it was nice this session to have the governor's full support on House Bill 1, and we wouldn't have got it without him because I tell folks, here's a lesson I learned quick. 2 beats 1 around the Capitol every day. If you're in the House, you better either have the Senate on board with you or you better have the governor on board with you, because if you don't have one of the two, you're going to be on the losing end of that deal. And so we were glad to have the governor's support on House Bill 1, and we tried to find consensus with the lieutenant governor and the Senate there. And that afforded several meetings on the issue with the lieutenant governor would bring his top chairman, and I would bring Trey Lamar and some of our appropriations chairman. We'd get in the room with the governor there and try to hash that out. It's just, it's real world politics, and the elbows are sharp. But I think it is made better. I think the legislation looks better in the long run from those kind of meetings, even when they're uncomfortable. And my wife and I, we've been, I would say, happily married for almost 30 years now, and we don't agree on everything. And so, whether it's Tate or Delbert, we're not going to agree on everything. And you and I probably don't, Ricky, on everything. But my point is, we tend to find, if you work hard enough, you can find consensus there. And if you keep plugging, usually good policy makes good politics. And I think we saw that with the school funding formula rewrite that was resisted so long from certain corners, and finally getting it over the finish line. House Bill 1 this year. And we're going to take that same mantra. We'll start with our meetings with the governor and the lieutenant governor on education freedom that we want to work on this session, on continuing our work with capital or metro revitalization projects around the Jackson metro area. We're going to continue to look at voting rights. We're going to continue to look at PERS, like those things. We're going to work hard in the off season. We think we've kind of got a method or a track record that what works for us is to pick some big issues, focus on them in the off season, have those meetings that you mentioned with the governor and lieutenant governor. And we even got a microcosm of that with the special session on the budget. There were meetings with the governor, lieutenant governor, and myself, setting some parameters for what that was going to look like. And I thought that helped us move that along in the special session on the budget. For sure.
I think you get it. We're out of time, and we'll the next time we'll talk about some of these other bills that passed. But when you're forming as a team, and sometimes they you have to do some storming to get to where you're norming and then performing. But that's just the process of building a team. And then you add in politics, it gets complicated. But at the end of the day, I think you end up with a better product when you're challenging each other that way. I think you've alluded to that. It's not always comfortable, but in this case, it worked out. So God bless you, my friend. Thanks for being in that position.
Thank you, Ricky. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. I always enjoy it. Kyle, thank you for your help.
As always, he's the man. This has been Jason White, Speaker of the House. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you.